Alright guys, we're back. Thanks again for watching, and we're going to continue sort of this series of talking about running games and things that you might need to think about including or implementing. Um, One thing that, some people have implemented, some people have not. I'm just throwing this out there because a lot of people have brought it up before, and it's something I definitely think you should consider. I'm not saying you should do it or you shouldn't do it, but you should definitely kind of look at the pros and cons and your player base and decide if you want to do something like this. And that's usually for most all of these kind of something to consider, right? And that is FPS limits at your game. Now, depending on what you're running, how you're playing, this may be a non-issue. If you run stock wars, literally you're not allowed to mod anything, obviously you don't need to worry about FPS limits, right? Pretty much anything you can go buy is not going to be a big problem, especially everywhere in iPro and all the other safety regulations, stuff like that you have in your game. Probably don't need to worry about it a whole heck of a lot. If you're running mostly homemades, a lot of very heavily modded things, you may consider an FPS limit, right? A lot of people will just ban specific blasters and say like, oh, we don't want singled Titans here, things like that. And that's, perfectly fine. You could do it. I just want to throw out there the idea of FPS limit banning or moderating, or just, you're not allowed to have certain things after a certain FPS limit. Sort of what are the pros and cons of that, right? For us, we really don't implement an FPS limit, but we do have ammo restrictions. We have, like, there's basically certain kinds of ammo you can and can't use at our games. We haven't so far had any problems. I mean, nothing that's been brought to our games will, like, break skin or anything, and we require iPro, so I mean, it's not like we really have to worry too much about people, taking things to the eye or, anything, like I said, breaking skin. That's really our biggest concern, that and, washer-tipped darts and stuff like that people might make themselves. It's less of a safety issue for us and more of we play at a school, right? And there's literally, like, windows and stuff all over. And if I know that a lot of people are like, oh, it's totally safe and it's fine, don't worry about it. I've been at games with washer tips. And, I know there's like a bajillion different kinds and things like that. So I don't want to say, oh, all of them are bad or all of them are good. I'm not saying they're bad or good. But I've been at games where, they've had felt over them or they've had hot glue. And like BBs and washer tips, I've seen ones where the BBs have, the glue over the BB has sort of worn a little bit, or the BB was just like not in the middle of the dart. And, the metal part was sticking out. Same thing with washers where I've seen them sticking out or the felt come off and then you just have bare washer there, which is, if that's your player base and you're playing like in the woods or an area that's totally fine. Once again, I completely go for it. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just letting you know the reason we don't do it is there's a lot of windows where we play. And if you have, we don't have blaster restrictions or an FPS limit, like I said. So if you have, something that's really powerful and you shoot something that has a metal washer at the end of it, and, the felt has come off of it and it hits a window and it shatters it, we're not playing there anymore. And we're probably gonna have to pay for the window, and, I don't want to be that guy that gives Nerf a bad name. I don't want that to be that group that's like, oh, we shattered a window and people were mad and then people were questioning the safety of things. It's because we play in a public place. It's a school connected to a park and, the public's there. But, if we were going to be playing with ammo that might potentially, even if we were not in this area and we were going to play, I might consider an FPS limit for stuff, that, like a single Titan. Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to just say, oh, it's a single Titan that immediately is disqualified. I mean, most people probably would, but, maybe it's not hitting that FPS limit. Maybe they've toned it down or they have a way of actually turning it up, turning it down. I know that can get a little bit dangerous because on field you can on the fly sort of up the FPS and just be like wrecking face. But, one of the reasons I don't like having to worry about an FPS limit, aside from the fact that, again, windows and public space and all of that, that's why we use the stock darts, is that it takes up a lot of time when we start. We used to have to do this in airsoft, and there's like a line of people and they have to make sure that every blaster gets approved. And at this point it's gotten to games where when there's 40 people there, if everybody has two blasters, just a primary and a sidearm, and we have to go through, we have one chrono, right? Maybe we can have somebody else bring one, but now we have to go through all of those blasters and it's just kind of very time consuming. And if somebody wants to switch, that means they have to get a third blaster, passed. And I'm not going to remember every single blaster on field and go, oh yeah, that's cool, that one's not. Oh, do you take tape and mark all of the blasters? Do you take a zip tie and mark them like you're at a convention and say that one's safe, you can play with it on field? It's just, for me, is something that I found was very difficult to police. And I'm not saying it's not doable or that you shouldn't do it. It's definitely something you should consider, and just kind of weigh the pros and cons, decide how you're going to go about doing it, what you're going to do. Maybe you have an FPS limit imposed, but you don't ever test anything, and you just say, hey, if people start complaining about somebody's blaster and it seems like it might be overpowered, we'll just test it. And if it's over the FPS limit, we'll tell them, hey, you weren't supposed to have this, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. That's a fine way of doing it as well. That's kind of the way we've handled blasters at our games, is just, unless someone's complaining about it, we don't really have a problem. And we've been lucky enough to have people that say, hey, I've heavily modded this, can I play with it? And usually I'll say, you know what, I'm going to go over there, that's, 10 feet away, shoot me with it. If it tags me and I'm not hurt, it doesn't break skin, I'll be fine with it. Like I said, we're using stock darts, so it really isn't too big of an issue. But again, there's a lot of different ways that you can test that. I'm not saying you have to specifically go out and get a chrono. You will have to if you want to set a hard FPS limit, but that is completely up to you. It's something that you should consider for your games, depending on the ammo you're playing with, where you play, how you play, your player base, right? If you're going to have like 5, 6, 7-year-olds there, maybe you want to impose an FPS limit. Maybe you don't want to allow certain things. But all of that sort of gets into a different episode. But FPS limit, definitely just consider the pros and cons, consider how you want to do it, why you want to do it, and, either try implementing it or explain, why you don't want to if people ask about it. That's what we've had to do a few times. So there's no right or wrong answer here, guys, but it's just something that, as always, I like to throw out there for people to consider, since a lot of people do it, a lot of people don't, and, it's really up to you in running your games. So there you go. I'm rambling now, so thanks, as always, guys. Stay safe, have fun, and happy tagging. Unless the battery dies, should be good. That's gonna be on YouTube. Just that. I'm gonna cut it 5 seconds. I got a wedgie.